My intro to modular synthesis tutorial. My name's Sephiros, and today I'm going to be taking you through the basics of modular synthesis. We're going to build a patch and maybe build more than one patch. I'm going to be using Voltage Modular, which is a VST modular environment that also has a standalone application, and you can get the intro version of it for free. So it's a great place to start out if you want to start patching and playing for free, because I have a hardware modular over here, and trust me, it's extremely expensive and kind of tedious to work with. And you can get a lot of similar results from software modular. There's several free modular environments that you can load up inside your DAW. Reactor Blocks, the intro version of that is free, and Voltage Modular is free, the intro version. At least I think it is. I got the intro for free, so either it was a promotional thing around New Year's, or maybe it was Black Friday or something, but I'm pretty sure it's always free. So check it out. You can get upgrades for it and expansion packs and things that you pay for, and that really opens it up to a whole nother world. I'll try to use mostly just basic stuff in this intro, so let's go. So I'm going to load up a Voltage Modular. It also comes with Voltage Modular Effects, which is like an effects version, which is really cool. So here's what it looks like. You put your modules in here. This is kind of like how you interface with your DAW up here. You have macro knobs that you can assign to things, as well as buttons that turn things on and off. So over here on the left is the browser. You can close it and open it with this library button. You can close the performance section with the perform button. There's even a little keyboard that you can pop out. And there's this question box, and that'll take you to the Cherry Modular website. So I think a good place to start with a patch could be an oscillator. So it's got this great browser where you can sort by name, category, A to Z, low to high, or whatever. So you can choose your filter, none, category, manufacturer, name. So let's do category. And then you can see here, if I close this, you have all your categories here. So we can go to oscillators, and we can grab an oscillator. So we got the we have a selection of oscillators here. The ones that come with the free version, I believe, is just this regular oscillator. So let's start with that. So how do we hear it? Well, you see you have outputs here at the bottom. And whenever you see a little hole for patching next to a knob, that's usually where a control signal would go in. And so if we want to hear this, we have our main outs, and we can drag. So now you can hear the oscillator. So let's disconnect that, because that's not very useful, right? You want to be able to control its volume. So let's get an amplifier. So I'm just going to type in amp here and choose none for the filter of the categories because I'm just typing it in here. So we're going to get an amplifier, and we're going to patch the output of one of these types of waveform into the input here of the amplifier. So I'll take the square wave output, and put it into the input, and then take the positive output of this amplifier and go into our main out. Okay, so now the signal from this oscillator is going into an amplifier, and we can control the volume of that with this gain. I have a bit of latency going on right here, so I'm just going to delete some of this stuff that I had going. And now we should have less latency. Yep. So we could use something to control this knob. You see how it says CV amount? CV stands for control voltage. And that's basically a signal between two different amounts that will allow us to control. And we can use this little slider, this little knob, to control how much we want that signal that's going into this little hole here to affect this knob. We can also choose a linear and exponential response. You don't need to understand that right now. All that's important to understand is we're going to control this knob. So we're going to get an envelope. And now we have an envelope generator. So we can patch the, see right here, this is the inverted version. We want the regular version, and we're going to put that into the hole. And now if we click this little gate button, we can see what our envelope sounds like. We can control the amount that we want that to control. Pretty cool. So now we want to be able to make this envelope generator happen, and we could either use a sequencer module, or we could use our keyboard and play it like a normal piano. So if we want to do that, we have our CV sources up here, and these are coming from our DAW. So you can see when I click a note on my MIDI keyboard, we're getting a little flashing light here on the MIDI from host. But we can also just take the gate and you see where it says gate in. We can take the gate from our keyboard. This represents our keyboard or our DAW. We can take the gate and put it into the gate in. So I was just playing multiple different notes on the keyboard, but it's just playing that one note. So we got our envelope working here, but we want to control the pitch of the oscillator. So we can take our pitch and we can put into the pitch CV of our oscillator. Cool, so now we have a playable synth. So let's get some interesting things going on. Maybe we could have the inverted version of this envelope modulate the pulse width of our oscillator. So that's pretty interesting. We could maybe use some of these other outputs here. And this is kind of a chance to show some cool things about modular. So maybe we'll get a filter. Just type filter out here. And we'll just get the basic filter. You see it says audio in. So we could take our audio in from the square wave. And then we can use our outputs here, either low pass, band pass, or high pass. Let's take our low pass and put it into our amplifier. Now here's the thing with voltage modular. If you click on one of these inputs, you can see that you actually have 6 inputs here. So this is actually not just an amplifier, it's a mixer. So you could mix signals. But I just want to get this output of this filter, and I don't want to hear the output straight from the oscillator anymore. So you can see it's color coordinated, so you can kind of tell what's what. So we're going to take this wire off. So now we're just hearing the filter. So you may think, oh, let's control the cutoff with the envelope too. That would be a classic thing to do. Get you that kind of Moog sound. So maybe we take the frequency mod 1 and we have the envelope go into that, and then we can use this little attenuator. This is an attenuator. Actually, it's an attenuverter, which means it allows you to go negative and invert the effect. Let's hear what that sounds like. Yep, we've all heard that. So that's cool. We can keep that for now, maybe have it less intense. Sorry if that was pretty quiet on the video. Sometimes it's hard to get the gain right on these videos, but you'll still be able to understand the concepts. Maybe we'll have the inverted output also control the resonance here. That way, at the height of the envelope, the resonance is less, and then as it goes lower in the cutoff, the resonance becomes more. So, one of the cool things about modular is you can take things and modulate other things with much more freedom than you can in most fixed architecture synthesizers. So let me show you what I mean. We have our frequency mod 2 here. What if we just took one of these audio outputs from the oscillator, say this triangle down, and modulate the filter cutoff. So let me take away the envelope modulation for 1 second, and let's just listen to what the audio rate modulation of a filter cutoff sounds like. I love audio rate modulation of filters. Sounds great. What if we mixed in the sine wave with the sawdown? So it sounds so cool when we move this little knob here, but there's no hole to control the knob. So what would we do? Well, if we want to control this knob, we could actually use an amplifier. So let's get an amplifier. And now we have another amplifier. And this is actually in modular world usually referred to as a VCA, which is stands for voltage controlled amplifier. So you've all used LFOs. Let's get an LFO out. Low frequency oscillator. And now we could maybe use this to control this knob. So how are we going to do that? Well, we're going to have to take these chords and go into the input first, and then go back into this. And we actually don't need to go into it twice because this is mixing that for us. So it's mixing the sawdown and the sine wave here in this amplifier. And now we can use this CV input to modulate this little knob. So this knob is still going to attenuate the signal, but this signal that's coming in here is now going up and down in volume at whatever rate we set on the LFO. So let's hear that. Very squelchy. Audio rate modulation on a filter cutoff plus LFO rate envelope modulation on the filter cutoff. What else could we do? Well, we have this 1 volt per octave hole up here at the top. And this is to help the modulation point here on the cutoff follow whatever key we play. So we can take our pitch and we can patch it into the 1 volt per octave, and now it will follow whatever key we play. So this knob, you're not going to see this knob move, but the cutoff is going to adjust automatically now according to what key we play. So this only has low pass, band pass, and high pass, but what if we combine the low pass and the high pass? That should give us kind of a notch, right? So all of this stuff comes free with the basic voltage modular. And this is very basic. You can go so deep with this. You can add as many modules as you want. You can have 100 oscillators, 100 filters, tons of distortions and sequencers, doing all kinds of stuff. So this really opens up a lot of possibilities that most soft synths don't offer. In the next one, we'll go deeper, but for now, I'll leave it at that. I'm going to save the preset. I'm going to call it, can we create a category? Yeah, let's put it in user presets, call it intro 1. You can put keywords, you can choose effects or instrument. They have a great browser for your presets. So I'll hit save. I guess we'll put it in bass. And yeah, so that's basically maybe we'll just do one more thing. Just one more thing. Let's put another filter. Let's take the audio from this amplifier and then let's go from there. So now we have 2 filters. Make this one key track as well. Maybe modulate the frequency with the triangle. And maybe one more thing, if this is going to be a bass patch, is we'll get another oscillator and we'll just create a sub. So maybe I'll have this filter run into another filter, just to show you how many things you can really put and how much detail you can inject into your patches. We'll take this last filter and go into another filter, have this one also key track, and then we'll take the high pass of this and go into a mixer. So let's show you a mixer. So I think by default, this, oh, that's a poly. We don't want that. We want the 6 input stereo mixer. I can't remember. I guess this is probably the one it comes with, I'm guessing. So you can see left is mono, and if you have a stereo signal, you can put stereo, but by default it's mono. So let's take the output of the high pass, and then let's go into the output. So now the fundamental, it's been taken away. So there's the fundamental. So if I high pass out the fundamental there, then I can use this second oscillator as a sub oscillator. And I don't know if it comes with a distortion. Yeah, so I think it comes with this distortion. And we'll take the sine wave into the distortion, and we're just going to clip it a bit so that it squares it off a bit. Hey Jez, how you doing? Yeah, you should check out Voltage Modular. I'm trying to use just the free stuff. You can get the environment for free, I'm pretty sure, and it comes with like the basic modules. There's a ton more modules that you can like pay for, but the free stuff is cool. So output, we're going to have to control that with another amp. So we'll take that, put the output of the distortion into the amp. So now we should have a pretty solid sub oscillator. We can control this CV with the same envelope. So let's mute our top bass. We could maybe pitch this down an octave. So I just want a little bit of upper harmonics. And then we can mix back in the top bass. So when it comes to organization, you can kind of group things together. So we'll put these two oscillators together. We'll put these two filters together. Put the envelope up here. Mixer. The distortion could be next to the sub oscillator, and the amp that it goes into afterwards could also be next to that. So kind of keeping the signal flow organized. We could keep modulation down here, so maybe we'll have the other filters up here as well. Could like put all the filters together. Let's see, if we close the library, we get more space. So we could kind of put all the filters together, and then LFOs can be down here. Maybe we'll take this and duplicate it, and then we could take it and duplicate it, and we could get a little bit of frequency modulation going on with our LFOs. So I could take the sine wave output of this one and go into the frequency control voltage input, and then take that, the sine wave of that, and go into this frequency input. And maybe duplicate another LFO and take the random output. And this random output, it's going to be a stepped output. And I'm going to try something. So in hardware modular, you can use a filter as a slew limiter, which means that if I use the low pass output, we can kind of round the edges of this stepped random. I wonder if Voltage Modular will let me do that. So I'm just going to get, sometimes to test things, it's nice to just get an oscillator and put the modulation right to the pitch, because it's kind of hard to tell what's going on sometimes when you're modulating other modulation. So this is kind of a good trick to help with that. We can close the library and then turn these down and take the output of this triangle wave. So you can see it is working. So we're using a filter, which is supposed to be for audio, and we're putting LFO rate modulation into it, and it's a stepped voltage, which means the edges are kind of squared off, and we're rounding those edges with the cutoff of a low pass filter. So in modular world, you can use audio things to process CV. You can use audio as CV. There's a lot more possibilities, and modulation is a lot more open and free. So let's take the low pass of this random LFO and modulate the speed of this LFO. So now we have a random LFO that's getting smoothed, and then it's modulating the speed of this LFO at a random amount. So 1 second it's going to be real slow, and then it's going to be fast, and then it's going to be mid speed, and it's going to kind of jump around in its speed. And then that speed, we're taking the sine wave of that and controlling the speed of this one. And then we're using the sine wave of this one and controlling the speed of this one. So we're modulating modulation that's modulating modulation, that's modulating modulation, that's modulating the volume of audio rate modulation that is modulating the filter cutoff. And that sounds like this. Let's see, I have to turn these up. So it's kind of like a semi-generative modulation setup where I can use these repeated attenuators to control the amount of kind of random modulation that's going to go into that filter, that's going to go to the volume of the oscillator that's controlling the cutoff. And we can mix in the sub again. I guess it would be a miss if I didn't show a sequencer, because sequencers are really like a really cool part of modular synthesis. So this is the one that comes default, and it's an 8-step sequencer. You can turn the steps on and off. You can choose what note, and you can see it tells you the note. And so we could take this CV output and go into the pitch of our top bass. But it's not working yet because we have to hit play. So for this, we could have it. Let's see, if I'm playing a D note, see, I'm actually mixing this sequencer's CV output with the pitch output of my keyboard. So I'm playing a D note, and then these are all set to C, right? We'll play a high C, a really high C. We'll play all the different Cs. So basically we create an arpeggiator, right? Because we're mixing the pitch outputs of the keyboard with a step sequencer. Maybe I don't want to do that. Maybe I just want this sequence playing, but maybe I do. It's kind of a cool thing. And, you can only do this kind of thing in modular environments where you can have this, and maybe, the whole thing with modular is that it makes modulating modulation really easy. So you have this CV offset here, and that's basically like, it's there to be able to transpose your sequence. So we could have that going well, we could have the CV output of another sequencer going into the CV offset of this sequencer, and now we can kind of pitch that around. So that's just kind of an example of like some quick step sequencer things. I might put the CV output into our sub oscillator as well. Yeah. So we have the CV offset on the sequencer, but we also have the external clock input. And the external clock input is looking for a signal to control it, and that'll allow us to control the time. So if we want it to be in sync with our DAW, we can take the transport up here, and we can put the sync output into the external clock and turn the external clock on. And then if we play our timeline, and maybe I have a drum, let me put a drum rhythm in here real quick. Okay, that didn't work. Why didn't it work? Let's see. Transport, sync out. It should be working. It's doing its arpeggiator thing really fast. Let's see. We might have to do a clock division. That's not very intro to modular, but out of necessity, I'm going to get a clock divider out. And this does not come default. I guess maybe... Yeah, I don't think it default comes with a clock divider, which is kind of silly, but we can take our clock sync output, and then we can take our divide by, and you can see this clock divider is dual clock divider, but we can take our output and put it in the sync and get rid of our old one, and then we should be able to slow this down. Let's see, divide by. So if we want these to reset when we hit play, we can do the we can do a reset trigger, and we can take the reset trigger. Well, this actually has a start button, so we can take the play from the transport and put it to the start, and I think that should work. And then same thing with this reset here on the clock divider. We can do the play, and that should reset. So if we hit play right here, so this clock divider is only letting us go and divide the sync from the transport by 16. So what we can do is we can actually take the output and go into the second input here, reset, same, and then do external clock that way. And then we can divide this 16 by 2 again. And then maybe at this point it doesn't make sense for our keyboard to be controlling the gate of our envelope. So let's take that off and put the gate in from So I put the stop output from the transport into the stop of the sequencer so that it'll stop. So we hit play. So you can see, you can still, with this setup that we have going, you can still control the pitch of your overall sequence. You can transport it around, you can transpose it around with your keyboard, but it's going. And so that allows you to kind of use some cool things in this. Maybe we want to turn some steps off. So that's kind of a cool effect there. You're getting kind of almost a hammer off effect, like a hammer on effect from a guitar. Because of this release time, it's leaving the amplifier open long enough to hear the effect of the sequencer on the oscillator. The oscillator is still affecting, or the sequencer is still affecting the oscillator. So you're still going to hear that pitch change unless you leave the pitch exactly the same on these steps that's off. So let me play around with that and I'll show you what I mean. So that's cool and all. But say we wanted to transpose this around with our keyboard, but have it stay in key and not just play this arpeggiated sequence in a weird way. So I guess I'll use another module that doesn't come standard. Oh, actually, I think this one might come standard. Yeah. So Quantizer. A quantizer will take an input of control voltage and quantize it to a scale. So you could put an LFO into here, and then it'll spit out a sequencer output. It'll basically make things steppy and quantize them to whatever values you choose here. So we could take this step sequencer. We can take the outputs that are going to our oscillator and put them into this output, and then put the input, connect that to the output. So now our sequencer is going into the quantizer, and then the output of the quantizer is going into the CV pitch of our oscillators. So now, if we're in D, we could put the key to D, and then instead of chromatic, we can choose one of these. There's all these different modes. I'm a fan of Phrygian, so let's do Phrygian, and then you can see it automatically turned these steps off for us. So you don't need to know music theory and figure out what notes are in your scale. You can just go here, choose a mode. You could choose minor. I'm choosing Phrygian. And this allows you to do some cool things, like you could actually offset it. You can modulate the offset. But let's just listen to this now. When I play different notes, all the arpeggiator notes should stay in our key. So I'll play in D. I'm going to play some notes in the key of D Phrygian. And yeah. I actually didn't like this note in the Phrygian scale. Maybe I don't like Phrygian. What is it that I like? Oh, so is it Lydian? Locrian? Yeah, sorry. It's Locrian. I really like Locrian. We might as well take the output of our DAW let's take the output of our DAW and put it through the quantizer so I can play wrong notes and feel good about it. And then we can put that into the pitch CVs. And this might be a good example of what happens when you run out. Oh no, we only have one hole left, and we want to control the cutoff of all these filters. Well, it's pretty easy. Usually in modular synthesis, you would grab a mult, So we'll grab this multiple, and this will allow us to create more versions of that signal. So we can take the last hole and put it into the input, and then we have 6 more here. So if you run out of holes on the way out of something, you use a mult. If you run out of holes on the way into something, you can use a mixer. So we'll take that output, control that. So you can get really cool rhythms and weird divisions of the grid with this clock divider. Like, I'm dividing the sync output of my DAW by 11 and then dividing that by 3, and that's why it sounds all wonky. So you can see that's like way too much range. I don't want to go up that high, so you can put 1 volt or 2 volts instead of 5 volts for the range. So I took the DAW pitch out of the quantizer, and I instead put it into the CV offset of the sequencer. And we could also put it, instead, let's put it into the CV offset of the quantizer. So I can still use my keyboard to kind of play around. You can also play around with like weird lengths. It's like 7 or 5.
Thank
Cool. Yeah, so I really like building melodies and things in modular environments, whether it be voltage modular or phase plant, because you can build these semi-generative patches that they're confined to the realms of pretty much always going to sound good, but always morphing and always changing and never playing exactly the same twice. And the reason why I do that is, one, because I like the result, but more so, two, I like working with something that's constantly morphing, because then I don't get bored. Because when you're producing, sometimes you get in a loop and you're stuck in a loop for a while. And if the loop is constantly changing, it's easier to stay interested and inspired. So hopefully that gives you some ideas. Go download Voltage Modular. It's free, the intro version. Build some patches. I used almost all free stuff in this really cool ARP melody. The only thing that I think that I downloaded or that I used that didn't come with the free version was this clock divider, but there's other modules on the site that are also free to download, so make sure to check that. If you get the environment, go on to the specific modules pages. People can build their own modules, and there's even a programmer that you can buy to build your own modules. A lot of them sound really good, and as you can see, I've purchased quite a few packs of third-party modules from the site. And look, you can even go on the store right inside the environment and just buy something. Like, they're like $15, $20. You know, they're pretty affordable little modules. And I didn't even touch on it, but you can use Voltage Modular as an effects unit as well. It doesn't have to be a source. You can just put it, like, I could just throw it on my drums and use some sort of cool effect inside Voltage Modular. So it's just another cool modular environment. I'd say it sounds better than most others. I mean, they all sound good, but for being free, it's definitely one of the best. The other one I've used quite a bit is Reactor Blocks, but the issue I have with Reactor Blocks is the UI isn't quite as good. So I like this UI more, even though it looks kind of toyish with all the garish colors. I think the setup's better because you can zoom. So you can zoom out and see your whole patch. And for some reason, you can't do that with Reactor Blocks. And so if you're patching from one thing to the other thing, you either have to like drag and it takes a million years, or you create like one of those little like things where you can put the input into the thing and then you put another module on the other side and then you can route it that way. But you know, they're both good. I'd say Reactor's probably a little more advanced maybe in some ways, but this is a really good place to start if you're interested in modular and you don't want to drop $5,000 on a Eurorack setup or more. So yeah, I hope that helped you kind of wrap your head. I know it got more complex than I originally thought it would. If you're a beginner, just the first like 15-20 minutes of that lesson should be enough to get you going on building a simple playable patch. But I really wanted to demonstrate kind of the complexity that you can get, because otherwise it doesn't really make sense why you would use a modular environment. Why wouldn't you just pull up a synth if you're going to build a playable synth? This is why. So you can do like crazy ARP melodies or generative noise patches. There's so many things you can do with it. So I hope you don't overlook it in your productions. The learning curve could be a little steep, but if you're interested, I offer lessons so we can go in more depth through Patreon at Sephiros. And I'll probably be making more videos on different patches that you can build inside software for those of you who maybe don't want to get Eurorack. And then I'm also working on the ability to film patching. I finally figured out how to get my camera routed through OBS, my DSLR, so I think I can get some shots of the modular, which means I'll be doing some actual Eurorack streams and talking more about modular and why it's so freaking cool. and fun and exciting and rewarding. So yeah, until next time, I'm Sephiros. Like, subscribe if you like the video. Please go play my music. If bass music is your thing, I've been putting out some bass music recently. All platforms, Sephiros 5 EP